So I've invited Ali to come and speak to us today. I have a few pre-prepared questions for you, Ali, but maybe just start by introducing yourself, and then we can talk a little bit about why we're talking today.
So if you don't know me, I'm Ali. I've lived in Lincoln for the last 10 years, and I've been at Life Church for the last 10 years as well.
Yeah, and so Rise Church, yes. And so we're talking to you today because, as I said, you're about to step into something that's very much in line with what we're talking about. I think it encapsulates much of what we've spoken about over previous weeks, but it earths it in a very practical, self-sacrificial way of living. And so do you want to tell us a little bit about the journey you've been on, but particularly what it is that you're about to embark upon?
Last week, Monday, I received final approval and confirmation to become a foster carer. This is something actually that God started to speak to me about around 2013, 2014. It's one of those conversations you have on a night shift around the desk when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and everybody's tired. And somebody just said, would you consider adopting? And I opened my mouth with every intention of saying no. But yes came out instead. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I went home. I thought a little bit about it at that time, but there was no way to make that happen at that time. So I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And thought that will be something later. And then around 8 years ago, I looked into the foster to adopt process, and for various different reasons, mostly financially, that didn't work out at that time. So I looked at fostering instead, but really didn't feel that at that time that was something that I could do. And then about 4 years ago, somebody gave me a prophetic word around not grieving about the children that I wasn't going to have. And I kind of, with the door closing on the adoption and that word, I kind of felt like, okay, children is just not something that God has for me. I thought that was the end of the road with that. God had other plans. And then end of last year, early this year, I knew I was just feeling really very restless and unsettled, and I knew that I was transitioning into something, but I didn't know what that was or what that looked like. Sorry, could I get some water? My mouth's really dry. Thanks, Becky. I knew that a house, because my flat's been a lovely place to live, but I was desperate for a home with a garden. Didn't know how that was going to happen either. And I was having a conversation with somebody actually at the Influencers Day and just saying, I want to trust God for a home, but there's other things that, I've trusted God for in the past. I was really, really clear, really thought he was saying, and it never worked out. So I obviously just got it wrong. And she said, well, hang on, who said you got it wrong? And as we talked about it, and we prayed, and I began to share my heart for what I had thought fostering might look like. Thank you so much. There was just a really obvious sense of, that's what this transition is, of course. It was almost like it wasn't a surprise. And as we were talking about it and as we were praying, there was just a deep sense of peace around it. And also it felt like, I think because I left school and trained as a chef, and then I went and trained as a nurse, and then I left that and I had to go and train as a teacher, and it's just felt at times like life is very bitty and it's kind of all over here, and I was like, I don't really see like where all of this is going. But as we were praying, it was like I saw slots and things were just slotting into place in a line, and it was just so clear that God was just lining everything up, and that all of those things were preparation for what is coming now, and it just brought a sense of purpose and a sense of peace. So.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Sally. Yeah, certainly that, preparation, chef, nursing, teaching, all skills that you will require as a parent, which is fantastic. So for those of us who, which would probably be most of us in the room, who don't have much familiarity with the process of what it looks like to begin fostering and then to become a foster carer, what does that process look like, and how has that been for you?
I mean, actually, for me, the process itself has been quite smooth and not at all stressful. It's only really been stressful because there was so much else going on at the same time, and it is a very intense process. But essentially, there are different options you can take. So you can choose to foster through the local authority, but there are a number of private fostering agencies as well. There's pros and cons to both. I went home and looked up and researched a number of companies. Decided to go with the one that I have gone with because they offer a lot of training. It's quite, although the money isn't the reason for doing it, I do still have to be able to live and provide for them. So they offer quite a good financial assistance program as well. And they have you have access to a whole host of really experienced foster carers to talk with. So I went along to an online information event just to find out a bit more. You fill in an application online, social worker makes contact with you, you have that sort of initial meeting, and then you have to have 8 meetings. Well, this is what this company does, others might do it slightly differently, but you have to have 8 meetings with that social worker, and you talk about absolutely everything, basically. So they'll go through your entire childhood, what your experience was growing up, how you were parented. They want to know everywhere you lived from birth, everywhere you've been to school and college and afterwards, every significant relationship you've ever been in. And there's good reasons for them knowing all of that, but it can be quite an intense process. And then you have to go to a panel, and the panel is about 12 people. It's made up of independent officers and social workers, foster carers, and a few other people. And they ask a lot of questions and give you examples. You know, what would you do in this situation? They will then make a recommendation as to whether they're going to approve you or not. It then has to go to the agency panel and the agency approver, and they get the final say on whether you're going to be approved as a foster carer or not. Within that, there's a whole kind of host of training and stuff that you have to do as well. So for me, the process actually happened really quickly. So I started this towards the end of February. I was approved last month, so yeah. So last week, sorry.
So less than 6 months.
Well, less than 6 months, yeah.
Okay, and maybe it'd be helpful just really quickly just to talk about some of the differences between adoption and fostering, and just tell us a little bit about kind of how it might work when you have a child placed with you.
So the main difference, obviously, if you adopt, that's a court process. You then legally become that child's parents. Any fostering allowances that you were receiving will stop at that point because you're expected to provide as you would for your own children. You then take on all the parental responsibility. With fostering, particularly short-term fostering, the parental responsibility is retained by the parents, but it's shared between the parents and the local authority. So there's lots of things that you can do as a foster carer, but there's lots of things that you don't necessarily have a say in. And some of it's simple things like if the child's hair is growing, it's out of control, you can get it cut, but you're not allowed to change the hairstyle unless the parents agree and approve it. Parents could say, and this is something we had to have a lot of conversations around, the parents could say, I'm happy for that foster carer, but I don't want the children going to church. And so it's like, well, how do you then manage that? You get a weekly allowance, fostering allowance. The organisation that I go with, that allowance is made up of a small amount of a carer's fee, and then the rest is money that are used to feed and clothe and take the kids out and do things with them, birthday presents, all of that kind of thing. Long-term fostering is ever so slightly different in that the parents may not, the child is, the courts have said the child can't go for adoption, but they can't go back to their parents either. So you may, at which point you'd get slightly extended parental responsibility, but you'd still share that with the local authority, and you would still get the allowance, the fostering allowance.
Yeah. So can I ask, how have you been preparing for this? Because alongside the process, there's also a preparation that needs to take place, a preparation in yourself. How have you been preparing sort of your heart and your home, I guess, for the children that are going to arrive?
Well, the home has been an interesting one, because once I started to think about, oh, there's going to be little kids running around here, you sort of view things quite differently. Because God was really clear about stepping out of work to do this, or at least stepping out of full-time work, I've had to, and I don't have a bedroom, I have a room, but that room was my office, so all of that's got to go. Got to get beds and furniture and stuff, just thinking about making more space in the flat, thinking practically about things like, I'm still believing that God has a bigger home for me somewhere with a garden, but there's no financial way that I can make that happen, so that's going to be a miracle. I mean, in terms of preparing my heart, I think my 7 or 8 years working as a children's nurse in the community, there were so many desperate and broken families, and there were so many times that decisions were made that I just didn't agree with and didn't really have any say over. I could have my input, but ultimately it wasn't my decision. So I was very well aware of what these children are coming from, and the environments that they've brought up in, and the things that they're likely to have experienced, and the fact that even if the home is violent and dysfunctional, that is still that child's family, and to take them out of that and place them with a stranger is a trauma in itself. So I think I was very aware of the practical issues, but turning that from thinking, well, as a professional, I know this is what's happening, to, as a parent, how do I manage that? I think it's just been a process of just prayer, really, and asking God for wisdom and guidance, and thinking through. I mean, a lot of this comes out in the fostering process, so they will say, how would you handle this situation, and how would you handle that? I think really it's just been asking God to prepare my heart, that I am able to have wisdom, that I'm able to love them well, provide them what they need. I really, these are children who, to all intents and purposes, are orphans. They don't have anybody who is watching over them and loving them, caring for them. Often the people who should love them the most are the ones that are creating the trauma. So my prayer really is that the home is a safe haven for them, that it's a place that they can be safe, that they can feel secure, that they can become everything that God's called them to be. And my other prayer is that at some point, unless it's a long-term fostering, those children will either go back to their parents or they'll be moved on. My prayer really is that every child leaves whole, restored, at least knowing the name of God, even if they've chosen not to make a decision for him at that point, but that they at least know that they have a Heavenly Father. So I guess much like any parent, it's, okay, Lord, how do I do that? What does that look like? I've also, the last couple of weeks, God's been really clear about taking a little bit of a sabbatical almost. So I finish work next Friday. He's asked me to just take a bit of time, because I'm getting paid until August, so just take a bit of time to just come away with him and just spend time seeking him, spend time in prayer, just getting prepared mentally and emotionally and spiritually for what's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, That sounds fantastic, Ali. So, as a church family, you know, we want to support you in that, and we want you to know that we are your family, and that, you know, if you need help with getting beds or cots or whatever else it may be, that you have family that you can turn to and ask for that. So what are some of the ways, sort of practical ways, spiritual ways, that we as a collective, as a family together, can come alongside and support you as you care and love these children?
So practically, I'm going from having kind of a box of crafts to do with my little niece, to needing, you know, beds, furniture, clothes, books, toys, games, all of those kinds of prams, car seats. At the moment, there's some things I don't know, because I don't know who I'm going to get placed first, so, or what age. So there's that kind of thing to think about. If anybody wants to buy us a house, that would be fantastic. Yeah. At some point, much like John and Rebecca were saying, at some point I'm going to need a bigger car. Well, strictly speaking, I need a bigger boot. I can't get a lot in the boot of my car. But that's probably a little way down the line. So there are, financially, the children are fairly well provided for. The allowance that we get is quite generous, which is good. But for myself, I've still, so God was very clear about stepping out of full-time work. I can use a small proportion of the allowance that we get towards paying gas and electricity and food to cover those extra costs. But I still need to find somewhere around $1,500 a month to cover my rent, my car, all of those things, because obviously you only get the allowance as long as a child is placed with you. If the child is moved on, that allowance stops till you get another one. So social care, for good reason, they want to know that you're not going to lose your house if you don't have a child with you. Prayer, so much prayer, please. For myself, as I go through this, I've been so grateful and so blessed with how generous people have been already in so many different ways, and it's really touched me. Actually, I think it's really shown me that we are family, you know. But for the children, you know, they don't have anybody who's covering them in prayer. They don't have anybody who is fighting for them or watching over them. They don't have, you know, their parents, sadly, and for many different reasons, are unable or occasionally unwilling to even meet their basic needs, let alone their spiritual needs. And so as a community, it's so important that we are covering these children in prayer, that we are being spiritual parents to them, that we're being family to them, because that's what they need. They need a safe family. There are some things not to do. These are traumatized children, and we need to understand that, you know, there's going to be emotional dysregulation. Trauma, early childhood trauma affects learning ability, behaviours, emotions, all of those kinds of things. And so we just need to have grace with them as well, practically as well, just because of what they've experienced. We're a church of huggers. A lot of people, we like to hug, and that's great. I like that. But we, for these children, we need to ask permission. They have not had safe boundaries. Nobody's put those in place. And one of the things I need to do with them is help teach them what safe boundaries look like. And so it's really important that we respect that and allow them to develop those, and for them to say no if they don't want to be hugged and things like that.
Okay, so what would you say, Ali, knowing that, you know, the process that you've been on, what would you say to anybody in the congregation, perhaps, who's here today or watching online, who might sort of be feeling a nudge towards going down this kind of direction, maybe looking at fostering, potentially looking at adoption? What would you say to them today?
I would say do it, but be prepared. So do your research, understand what the backgrounds that these children are coming from, understand the process, the fostering and the adoption process. Be really sure that it's what you want to do, because, you know, you might get part way into the process and think, you know, you don't want to. that's fine. But actually, once you've got children placed with you, if you decide at that point you don't want to do it, you know, that gets a bit more complicated. It is, you are opening the door to something. There's a lot of requirements. So you, as a foster carer, will have supervision with your social worker every 2 weeks. You have to take the child to family contact as often as the court mandates it, which could be 3 or 4 times a week. They often don't move the children from the school that they're in unless they're going into long-term fostering, because it's important to keep that stability for that child. So you may have a child placed with you who goes to school on the other side of the county, and it's your job to get them there and back again. You have to go to child looked after children reviews on a regular basis. You have to keep a daily log as a foster carer for that, as each child that you have, and that has to go onto the system. The company that I'm with, they don't mandate sort of what proportion of the allowance you can spend on certain things, but you still have to keep a log of everything that you spend and all of the receipts. So it's not just like having your own kids in many ways. There's a lot of extra stuff that comes along with it, and it is fine and it's very rewarding, and every foster carer that I've spoken to says the good times far outweigh the bad ones, but just be prepared, there's a lot involved.
Ali, before we pray for you, is there anything else that you'd like to just share with us? Any other thoughts that you'd like to offer?
Yeah. So I think, as you were saying earlier, I think one of the things that, I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm stepping into this now. I think this is God's timing in relation to sort of where we're at as a church and a community as well. I think one of the things God's been speaking to me a lot about, you know, one of the things I want to do is the parent and child fostering, which is where you take a teenage parent, usually the mum, sometimes the dad, and their baby, you foster them both. And sometimes the reason for that is you need to do an assessment which will go to court, and it will be part of the process that will decide whether that baby can stay with that parent or not, or whether the baby needs to be removed from, I'm going to get emotional, be removed from the mum. And I really, really want to be able to do that, to come alongside these and show them that they can, because I think society throws abortion around as an easy option. And as a church, as individuals, as Christians, we hold particular beliefs about abortion, and that's fine, and I don't disagree with those. But I think one of the things God's really been highlighting is that it is, you know, it isn't enough to stand and say these things are wrong if we're not providing an alternative. If we're not giving these teenage mums somewhere safe to go to at least try and be a parent and show them how to do that, you know, it's not enough to do that. And I think you know, there's so much research, a lot of it from the Social Justice Centre, but a lot of other places as well. But there's so much research which talks about the impact on society as a whole of the breakdown of families. You know, children who experience early childhood trauma or family breakdown, it doubles their chances of failing at school. It doubles their mental health chances of mental health. It doubles the chances of delinquency and getting into trouble with the police. It doubles their chance of becoming teenage parents. It doubles more than doubles so many other things. And of course, all of those things have an impact on us as society and on our services and the places that we live. And if we are talking about transforming society, we're talking about transforming people and individuals and families and family units. And so we have to be family to do that. We have to be willing to take people into our homes and our lives. And it's messy and it's dirty and it's uncomfortable, but that's what it looks like to be church. And this is what you know, if God didn't put the church on earth for things like this, then what for? You know, so yeah, that's what I want to say.
Well, Ali, I think I can speak for all of us. Just say, I think you're doing amazing. You're doing something incredible, and we're really, really proud of you, and we are 100% behind you in everything that you're about to step into. And we're going to pray for you as well. But it's just, I think this is a fantastic example. Like you said, I don't think there's any coincidence that you're stepping into this now. As I believe that God is calling us corporately as a church to step into this identity of those who bring transformation, of ambassadors of God, bringing a taste of heaven to earth. And this is one of the very, very practical, messy, uncomfortable ways in which we do it. But that's the life that he's called us to. That's the life that he modeled and he calls us to follow. And I think you're doing a fantastic job of following him into this endeavour of fostering, as well as you perhaps lead us in restoring the streets of the place that we've lived in with this great example. So, church, why don't we just let's give Ali a big, massive round of applause. And maybe we could have our worship team could come back and just play whilst we gather some to come and pray for Ali. I'd love particularly if the mothers in the room could come and gather around Ali and pray over her. And we're going to pray and prophesy over you as well, Ali. But if you're a mum in the house today and you feel comfortable just coming around Ali and praying over her and praying with her, that would be fantastic. And worship team will just play for us, and as we pray, just at the right place, just take us into a final song of worship as we just give thanks to God for what he's done.